Chapter 11 of Book 1 of Prior Analytics by Aristotle, translated by Octavius Owen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jeffrey Edwards. Chapter 11 of the same in the third figure. In the last figure, when the terms are universally joined to the middle, and both premises are affirmative if either of them be necessary, the conclusion will also be necessary, and if one be negative, but the other affirmative, when the negative is necessary, the conclusion will be also necessary. But when the affirmative is so, the conclusion will not be necessary. For first, let both propositions be affirmative, and let A and B be present with every C, and let A, C be a necessary proposition. Since then B is present with every C, C will also be present with a certain B, because an universal is converted into a particular, so that if A is necessarily present with every C, and C with a certain B, A must also be necessarily present with a certain B, for B is under C. Hence the first figure again arises. In like manner, it can be also demonstrated if B, C is a necessary proposition. For C is converted with a certain A, so that if B is necessarily present with every C, but C with a certain A, B will also of necessity be present with a certain A. Again, let A, C be a negative proposition, but B, C affirmative, and let the negative be necessary. As therefore an affirmative proposition is convertible, C will be present with some certain B, but A of necessity with no C. Neither will A necessarily be present with some B, for B is under C. But if the affirmative is necessary, there will not be a necessary conclusion, for let B, C be affirmative and necessary, but A, C negative and not necessary. Since then the affirmative is converted, C will also be with a certain B of necessity. Wherefore if A is with no C, but C with a certain B, A will also not be present with a certain B, but not from necessity, for it has been shown by the first figure that when the negative proposition is not necessary, neither will the conclusion be necessary. Moreover, this will also be evident from the terms, for let A be good, B animal, and C horse. It happens therefore that good is with no horse, but animal is necessarily present with every horse. But it is not however necessary that a certain animal should not be good, for every animal may possibly be good. Example 1. No horse is good. It is necessary that every horse should be an animal. Therefore some animal is not good. Or If this is not possible, viz., that every animal is good, we must assume another term as "to wake," or "to sleep," for every "animal" is capable of these. Example 2. No horse wakes/sleeps. It is necessary that every horse should be an animal. Therefore some animal does not wake/sleep. If then the terms are universal in respect to the middle, it has been shown when there will be a necessary conclusion. But if one term is universally, but the other particularly predicated of the middle, and both propositions are affirmative, when the universal is necessary, the conclusion will also be necessary, for the demonstration is the same as before, since the particular affirmative is convertible. If therefore B is necessarily present with every C, but A is under C, B must also necessarily be present with a certain A, and if B is with a certain A must also be present necessarily with a certain B, for it is convertible. The same will also occur if A, C be a necessary universal proposition, for B is under C. But if the particular be necessary, there will not be a necessary conclusion, for let B, C be particular and necessary, and A present with every C, yet not of necessity. B, C then being converted, we have the first figure, and the universal proposition is not necessary, but the particular is necessary. But when the propositions are thus, there was not a necessary conclusion, so that neither will there be one in the case of these. Example 3. Every C is A. It is necessary that some C should be B, /B should be C. Therefore, some B is A. Moreover, this is evident from the terms, for let A be wakefulness, B biped, but C animal. B then must necessarily be present with a certain C, but A may happen to be present with every C, and yet A is not necessarily so with B, for a certain biped need not sleep, or wake. Example 4. Every animal wakes. It is necessary that some animal should be biped. Therefore, some biped wakes. So also we may demonstrate it by the same terms if A be particular and necessary. Example 5. It is necessary that some animal should be a biped. Every animal wakes. Therefore, something that wakes is a biped. Every animal wakes. It is necessary that some biped should be an animal. Therefore, some biped wakes. But if one term be affirmative and the other negative, when the universal proposition is negative and necessary, the conclusion will also be necessary. For if A happens to know C, but B is present with a certain C, A must necessarily not be present with a certain B. But when the affirmative is assumed as necessary, whether it be universal or particular, or particular negative, there will not be a necessary conclusion, for we may allege the other same reasons against it, as in the former cases. But let the terms when the universal affirmative is necessary be wakefulness, animal, man, the middle, man. Example 6. Some man does not wake. It is necessary that every man should be an animal. Therefore, some animal does not wake. But when the particular affirmative is necessary, let the terms be wakefulness, animal, white. For animal must necessarily be with something white, but wakefulness happens to be with nothing white, and it is not necessary that wakefulness should not be with a certain animal. Example 7. Nothing white wakes. It is necessary that something white should be an animal, therefore some animal does not wake. But when the negative particular is necessary, let the terms be biped, motion, animal, and the middle term animal. Example 8. It is necessary that some animal should not be a biped. Every animal is moved. Therefore, something which is moved is not a biped. Chapter 12. A comparison of pure with necessary syllogisms. It appears then that there is not a syllogism de in esse, unless both propositions signify the being present with, but that a necessary conclusion follows, even if one alone is necessary. But in both, the syllogisms being affirmative or negative, one of the propositions must necessarily be similar to the conclusion. I mean by similar, that if the conclusion be simply that a thing is present with, one of the propositions also signifies simply the being present with. But if necessarily, that is, in the conclusion, one of the propositions is also necessary. Wherefore, this also is evident, that there will neither be a conclusion necessary, nor simple de in esse, unless one proposition be assumed as necessary, or purely categorical, and concerning the necessary, how it arises, and what difference it has in regard to the de in esse, we have almost said enough. Chapter 13. Of the contingent, and its concomitant propositions. Let us next speak of the contingent, when and how, and through what propositions there will be a syllogism, and to be contingent, and the contingent I define to be that which, not being necessary, but being assumed to exist, nothing impossible will on this account arise, for we say that the necessary is contingent equivocally. But that such is the contingent is evident from opposite negatives and affirmatives. For the assertions, it does not happen to be, and, it is impossible to be, and, it is necessary not to be, are either the same, or follow each other, wherefore also the contraries to these, it happens to be, it is not impossible to be, and, it is not necessary not to be, will either be the same, or follow each other. For of everything there is either affirmation or negation, hence the contingent will be not necessary, and the not necessary will be contingent. It happens, indeed, that all contingent propositions are convertible with each other. I do not mean the affirmative into the negative, but as many as have an affirmative figure as to opposition, e.g., it happens to exist, is convertible into, it happens not to exist, and, it happens to every, into, quote, it happens to none, close quote, or quote, not to every, close quote, and quote, it happens to some, close quote, into quote, it happens not to some, close quote. In the same manner also with the rest. For since the contingent is non-necessary, and the non-necessary may happen not to exist, it is clear that if A happens to be with any B, it may also happen not to be present, and if it happens to be present with every B, it may also happen not to be present with every B. There is the same reasoning also in particular affirmatives, for the demonstration is the same, but such propositions are affirmative and not negative, for the verb quote, to be contingent, close quote, is arranged similarly to the verb quote, to be, close quote, as we have said before. These things then being defined, let us next remark that to be contingent is predicated in two ways. One, that which happens, for the most part, and yet falls short of the necessary, for instance, for a man to become hoary, or to grow, or to waste, or in short, whatever may naturally be, for this has not a continued necessity, for the man may not always exist, but while he does exist, it is either of necessity, or for the most part. The other way, the contingent is indefinite, and is that which may be possibly thus, and not thus, as for an animal to walk, or while it is walking for an earthquake to happen, or in short whatever occurs casually, for nothing is more naturally produced thus, or in a contrary way. Each kind of contingent, however, is convertible according to opposite propositions, yet not in the same manner, but what may naturally subsist is convertible into that which does not subsist of necessity. Thus it is possible for a man not to become hoary, but the indefinite is converted into what cannot more subsist in this than in that way. Science, however, and demonstrative syllogism do not belong to indefinites, because the middle is irregular, but to those things which may naturally exist. And arguments and speculations are generally conversant with such contingencies. But of the indefinite contingent we may make a syllogism, though it is not generally investigated. These things, however, will be more defined in what follows. At present let us show when, and how, and what will be a syllogism from contingent propositions. Since then that this happens to be present with that, may be assumed in a twofold respect, for it either signifies that with which this is present, or that with which it may be present. Thus the assertion A is contingent to that of which B is predicated signifies one of these things, either that of which B is predicated, or that of which it may be predicated, but the assertion that A is contingent to that of which there is B, and that A may be present with every B, do not differ from each other, whence it is evident that A may happen to be present with every B in two ways. Let us first show if B is A is contingent to every B, and B to every C, there will be a perfect syllogism, so that A is contingent to every C, which is evident from the definition, for thus we stated the universal contingent to imply. So also if A is contingent to no B, but B to every C, it may be concluded that A is contingent to no C, for to affirm that A is contingent in respect of nothing to which B is contingent, this were to leave none of the contingents which are under B. But when A is contingent to every B, but B contingent to no C, no syllogism arises from the assumed propositions. but B, C, being converted according to the contingent, the same syllogism arises as existed before, as since it happens that B is present with no C, it may also happen to be present with every C, which was shown before. Wherefore, if B may happen to every C, and A to every B, the same syllogism will again arise. The like will occur also if negation be added with the contingent mode to both propositions, I mean as if A is contingent to no B, and B to no C. No syllogism arises through the assumed propositions, but when they are converted, there will be the same as before. It is evident then that when negation is added to the minor extreme, or to both the propositions, there is either no syllogism or an incomplete one, for the necessity of consequence is completed by conversion. If, however, one of the propositions be universal, and the other be assumed as particular, the universal belonging to the major extreme, there will be a perfect syllogism, for if A is contingent to every B, but B to a certain C, A is also contingent to a certain C, and this is clear from the definition of universal contingent. Again, if A is contingent to no B, but B happens to be present with some C, it is necessary that A should happen not to be present with some C, since the demonstration is the same. But if the particular proposition be assumed as negative, and the universal affirmative, and retain the same position as if A happens to be present to every B, but B happens not to be present with some C, no evident syllogism arises from the assumed propositions, but the particular being converted, and B being assumed to be contingently present with some C, there will be the same conclusion as before in the first syllogisms. Still, if the major proposition be taken as particular, but the minor as universal, and if both be assumed affirmative or negative, or of different figure, or both indefinite or particular, there will never be a syllogism, for there is nothing to prevent B from being more widely extended than A, and from not being equally predicated. Now let that by which B exceeds A be assumed to be C. To this it will happen that A is present neither to every, nor to none, nor to a certain one, nor not to a certain one, since contingent propositions are convertible, and B may happen to be present to more things than A. Besides, this is evident from the terms, for when the propositions are thus, the first is contingent to the last, and to none, and necessarily present with every individual. And let the common terms of all be these, of being present necessarily, animal, white, man, but of not being contingent, animal, white, garment. Example 1. It happens that something white is not an animal. It happens that every no some not every man is white. It is necessary that every man should be an animal. It happens that something white is not an animal. It happens that every no some not every garment is white. it is necessary that no garment should be an animal. Therefore it is clear that when the terms are thus, there is no syllogism, for every syllogism is either de in esse, or of that which exists necessarily or contingently, but that this is neither de in esse, nor of that which necessarily exists, is clear, since the affirmative is subverted by the negative, and the negative by the affirmative, wherefore it remains that it is of the contingent, but this is impossible, for it has been shown that when the terms are thus, the first is necessarily inherent in all the last, and contingently is present with none, so that there cannot be a syllogism of the contingent, for the necessary is not contingent. Thus it is evident that when universal terms are assumed in contingent propositions, there arises always a syllogism in the first figure, both when they are affirmative and negative, except that being affirmative it is complete, but if negative, incomplete. We must nevertheless assume the contingent not in necessary propositions, but according to the before named definition, and sometimes a thing of this kind escapes notice. End of chapter 14. Recording in memory of Mitchell Edwards.